thanks very much for speaking to me.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks very much
Thanks
for
for
a
speaking to
fantastic
me.
book. The cover of the book really kind of sells it as this book that really goes into this dark body horror kind of book. But I came out of it completely the opposite. It really does things that I really didn't expect. Mainly kind of I came out really appreciating how important characters are in books and how close you can get to characters and their authors through the books. So I'm quite curious what came first, this idea to kind of to portray how much we can connect with people through written word, or the actual story itself of to kind of to follow this decomposition of a body and kind of tie it through milestones in the story of the book.
It was sort of both.
Uh-huh.
I went into this wanting to write about, like, I knew that I wanted to write several books, basically. I knew that I wanted to write something about dead bodies. I knew that I wanted to write something about being lost in the woods, and I knew that I wanted to write about OCD, particularly the experience of like losing your mind to the point where you don't know what's real and what's not, and like being super unmedicated, newly diagnosed. Because I had like a dead body list, but similar mental breakdown in my really early 20s before I got diagnosed with OCD. And unlike normal people who probably would have just been busy having a mental breakdown, the writer in me was like, I kind of want to. I kind of want to use this as like an archaeological dig,
Wow.
and study myself and see what is happening to my mind, or what has happened, I guess, and use it for something. And then I was like, what if my dead body book could be the same book? So I knew that I wanted the dead body and the OCD to be the same book, because I kind of wanted to mirror, I guess, the decomposition of the body to the decomposition of the mind, or the
Mhm.
process of getting your
Right.
mind back. And I think I also just wanted to write something that showed people without any sort of mental illness kind of how much it can do, how much it can mess with your mind, and then uh, how hard you have to work to get it back, just to kind of do a study of empathy, and I
Yeah.
guess like see how much empathy other people could maybe get, or get some sort of understanding for people in their lives that are going through something like this.
Yeah. No, good. I mean, it really resonated with me because I've not been actually diagnosed with OCD, but I've had general anxiety disorder, which I'm pretty sure is OCD since I
Yeah.
can remember as well. And kind of a lot of these processes and these repetitions of things that she's and these ruminations were all very similar kinds of things that I'd gone through, that have gone through for the past 30 odd years. Yeah. So it really resonated with me in a big way. So I was really curious why you wanted kind of the decomposition of the body to go with this kind of OCD. And I understand completely now that you said you it was kind of like a metaphor of kind of the body, the mind decaying in it's kind of the same way as the body.
Yeah, it's also just one of my OCD fears. I think that a lot of my work is focused around death because my OCD is very focused around death.
Right.
Um, right now, I'm currently, it's fun. The publication of my OCD book has made the OCD worse. So,
Right.
which is hilarious to me. But I'm currently convinced that either me or my wife are going to die before publication. So as we get closer to publication, I've been getting like more and more paranoid.
Yeah. I
And it's
completely get that
interesting.
100%. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's just whenever I get something that I should be excited about, that is when the
Mhm.
OCD really kind of kicks in and says, no, you're not going to, something bad's going to happen. You're not going to experience this the way that you should do. And I guess that's
Yeah.
kind of how you're feeling right now, no?
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting because as it gets closer and closer, especially because the publication of traditionally published books just takes such a long time from sale to the book actually being out. So it's been like this 14-15 month period at this point where it's just been like slowly getting worse.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm looking at it like, oh no, how's this gonna become book launch? The day of the book launch, I'm gonna be looking around like, who's gonna take me out?
But not,
Super
I mean,
paranoid.
but I mean, I can understand it's normal to be so to kind of preoccupied about, especially the first novel that you're kind of publishing now. But at the same time, it must be, I guess, a weight off your mind. Like you said, you wanted to be able to share with people that haven't gone through these kind of these experiences, this OCD. They haven't suffered
Mhm.
with it or depression. It must be really cathartic and exciting for you to be able to get that off your chest at the same time, know and share it with people, and maybe people who didn't know that you've gone through that or maybe close to you may be able to kind of relate to you better and maybe even come and speak to you and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I actually don't like I try not to think about people close to me reading the book
All
because
right.
I feel like I'm like, oh no, you guys are gonna know too much about me, especially my coworkers, you
Right.
know, like I'm gonna show up to work like after the book comes out because but other than that, I don't know. It is a relief for sure. I feel like the biggest time that I felt that was when I turned in the past pages. Like when I turned in that final round of edits, I was like, okay, if I die, they still have to print. So we're okay. Everything's fine. They still have to print it no matter what. People are gonna know what this is like. That this book in particular is just very personal and very important to me. So I was like, okay, we're good. Death is okay now.
Uh-huh.
But of course, when I start the next book, it'll be like, all right, I can't die until this book is edited and published in end.
I'm laugh, but I get the exact same feelings. I remember when I had my first one of both kids. I had
Yeah,
exact same kind of sensations. I wasn't going to see them grow up and all these kind of these morbid things that didn't happen in the end, thankfully. But it just really resonated with me the whole all the way through the book. So good.
thank you.
Uh-huh. So
Thank you.
I want to talk. So I mean, I want to talk a little about the structure because obviously relating specific kind of story beats with kind of a decomposing body can't have been the easiest thing to do because how do you decide which part of a story is going to relate to a specific kind of process that a body goes through once it's no longer the blood's no longer
Yeah.
running through it?
Um, it, well, first of all, the government is going to be tracking me for a very long time.
Why do you say
Um,
that?
because a lot of the research for this book was kind of ugly. Like, I did try to be a mortician.
Right.
Temporarily, I applied to be a mortician,
But was that
but I
specifically for the
can't.
book? Specifically for for
Specifically for the book,
research?
yeah,
Right.
I was like, I feel like I need to figure out dead bodies and how long this takes. Because the first part of it was that I had to nail how long each period of
Sure.
decomposition was, because the number of pages per part of the book is actually set to be relative to the amount of time that the body is in that stage of
Right.
decomposition. So like autolysis is really fast, fresh corpse um, it's really fast. It depends on where you are. Obviously, Ava is in an environment where it's very cold,
Yeah.
so she was able to preserve longer. But if Ava was in the Amazon, it would be a very short book. So, you know, I had to make sure that I put them first of all in the right environment for this, and then I had to figure out how long bodies spend in each stage. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll be a mortician for a little while. Tried to be a mortician. They said, no, you can't be a mortician because you can't drive. Boo.
Oh, you have to drive
Uh,
to be a mortician.
you have to drive to be a mortician, yeah, because you have to go and pick up the dead bodies.
Oh, actually
Yeah.
seeing it and kind of the medical things and everything else, it wasn't necessary. Driving was more
Yeah,
important than
well,
all of that.
because you can go to school for it and you can be an apprentice.
All right.
You can work in like a crematorium and just push the bodies in.
Right.
There are a lot of things that you can do, but apparently, above all else, you have to be able to drive
Right.
so that you can go and pick up the dead bodies from people's houses. Um,
So
so
when you
no,
found you couldn't do that,
I
how did
tried to
you
get into a body farm.
body
Uh,
farm?
A body farm, yeah. So body farms are, I think there's like four or five in the US. And they're in different parts specifically so that you can study how bodies do in different environments.
Uh-huh.
And basically what they'll do is it's people that donate their bodies to science are the people that are on these body farms. But what they do is they'll put like one body in a swamp environment in like Louisiana where it's hot.
Right.
They'll put one body in like a little cage so that animals can't get to it, like in the woods. They'll put a body just on the grass, like lying, whatever. And then the police and scientists and people like that, professionals at solving crimes or, pathologists, things like that, they can come and they can study the body in various states of decomposition
Different
and
insects and
see.
different kinds of animals
Yeah,
that are living on there. Yeah. Right.
yeah, and it helps them solve crimes because, like, if you think about it, it really depends, like, when you're judging time of death and what happened to a person when
Sure.
you find a body. Um, it's very dependent on where you are. A body that is in a blizzard for a week and frozen is going to be very different than a body that you find after a week in a swamp where it's 100 degrees you
Mm.
know um so the police basically they go in and they study bodies in these different environments and they try to see how we react basically, and then that helps them better to solve crimes. So I did some research and I tried to get into one of those so that I could see. And apparently researching debut novel is not is not a good enough excuse to be
To get in
invited to
there.
be a professional
Right.
into one of those. So my book research was very much like, reading Caitlin Doty's books. She's a mortician and she writes a lot about what it's like working with the dead, and like also what bodies do at different stages and how we're all meat sacks. She's very good. She's very funny. So it was a lot of that first,
Uh-huh.
just studying exactly what happens. And then after that, it was about trying to make sure that the progression of the insanity was like slow enough to match the progression
Yeah.
of the dead body. And like I really wanted like the bloat phase to be kind of mirror this sort of like puffing up of the mental issues as the body puffs up, and then in active decay you pop. So your body gets really big and then it just goes and all the fluids that have been building up inside and gases leak out and it's very gross. So
Mhm.
yeah, I wanted to make sure that I kind of like mirrored the insanity and the progression of the insanity to these stages of decay, but also preserve that the relative numbers of pages per part were
Uh-huh.
matching the time that a body in that environment would spend in that stage.
Uh-huh. It's so curious to me that someone who says their OCD is so specifically about death would want to dabble so deeply in all this kind of very morbid
Yeah,
stuff. Was it helpful
yeah.
or did it make it worse? Because I know that
Um,
if I went to a farm or something like that, I don't know, I can't even last 2 minutes in a cemetery, let alone something like a
yeah.
farm.
I think that the way that I cope with my OCD is actually to try to look at it. I like
Right.
information. I like to know the thing. One of the things about OCD is, the search for certainty. So I think for me, it's about kind of being willing to look at it. Similar to actually the author that I was talking about before,
Mm.
Caitlin, she said that the reason that she became a mortician was because she saw a child die as a child.
Right.
Um, she was like in a mall and a child fell off the top stair and hit the ground really hard like that. And it was really traumatic for her. And she was really scared of death for many, many years. And then after that, she was like, I'm just going to try to conquer my fear of death by looking at it a bunch.
Mhm.
And I think that's how I chose to go. I was like, okay, if I'm worried about what I'm going to become, because I'm definitely terrified of decomposition. I'm very scared of death. I'm always trying to avoid it in any way that I can. I'm really, really paranoid about it, but it's also really important to me that I know kind of how it's going to be, I guess, physically if I can know mentally, because nobody can know mentally, right? We don't know
Mhm.
what it's going to be, but at least I know what's going to happen to my body. And that was important to me. So,
It's important, but is that a plus point to know what happens to your body, knowing all the kind of gory, gruesome details? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think it's
I
it's
just haven't.
important for me to face it.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I knew. It's always been really fascinating to me, particularly because you know people as people. You see them walking around. Like it's always been kind of weird to me that it's like you can have somebody that's just walking around and talking and your friend, and then they die, and then that's it. And it's also really interesting to me the way that people handle death in Western cultures because when you think about it, I mean it used to be that in Western cultures you would handle the dead body a lot more, before you had the
Yeah.
funeral industry. It would be like when a person in your family would die, like your neighbor Joe who's a carpenter would build the coffin and you would clean the body and dress it and everything yourself. Now we don't do that. Now it's like when somebody that you love dies, it's like, okay, get him away from me as soon as possible.
Yeah. I do with care.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's interesting to me too, because like when you think about it, you like, what does it mean to love a person? Like, do you love them forever or do you
Hmm.
just love them until they're gross, uh, and empty? And it's like, when I think about like my wife's body, like people that I love's body, actually, my Ava is very much a love letter to my wife.
Hmm.
Um, And so, partially because I'm terrified that she's going to die, she's very important to me. But
Yeah.
I would be like looking at her in the middle of the night and while I was writing this book, and she'd be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm
Yeah.
trying to imagine what you would look like in the bloat stage of decomposition." Um, and she'd be like, "That's gross." And I told her, but I was like, I don't know if the love would end necessarily. Like, you try to think about what you would do if somebody that you love died, and it's like, would I want to get this corpse away from me as soon as possible?
Hmm.
Or would I want to sit with it for a little while? Like, would I want to be the one to clean and dress a body of
Yeah.
somebody that I loved, or would I just want it to be gone? And I think kind of like one of the things that I wanted to analyze with this book was Savannah sitting with this body while it decomposed and kind of being like, I'm just going to sit with you through this. Yeah,
Yeah.
even though Ava obviously wasn't conscious for any of that, Savannah sees it as like, I'm sitting with you in this like kind of sacred space of letting you decompose. And I'm just going to like hold space for you to decompose and you can hold space for me to have my problems.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know, you kind of wonder if that's love.
Yeah. No, yeah,
Like,
it sounds very morbid, but yeah, definitely. What I and I found it really I said that I found the book really poignant in the fact that even though this person's a complete stranger decomposing in the back garden, um, it just feels so powerful that even though they never met, I don't want to give too much away. I don't know how much I can give away. I don't know how much is a natural blurb. But even though they've never met these two people, it's amazing
mm.
how much someone can leave behind through the written word. So I'm curious, um, was kind of the genesis of you becoming a writer also this kind of the idea of not actually physically dying once you die, I die. We've got something that people can still fall in love with us through without having even ever met us before.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I mean, you're British. You've probably seen Doctor Who. You're not British. You're Scottish?
I know people think I'm Scottish. No, I'm originally from the north of England. Yeah, I'm from near Manchester. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. Because I work in a hotel that we get a lot of people from Europe, so I wanted to
right.
get the accent right, maintain my street cred. But yeah, I'm sure you've seen Doctor Who
I
at
have.
some
I'm not a
point.
big fan, but I have seen. Yeah, I've seen some of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this one episode of Doctor Who that I saw when I was like 12, where they go and meet Agatha Christie. And when they meet Agatha Christie, they're just both kind of like marveling that she doesn't know that she's gonna like they've also been to this library miles after the end of the world, and Agatha Christie is in it. And the doctor's like, isn't it cool that like we're meeting her, but she doesn't know that she's going to be in this library at the end of the world? So I saw that when I was like 12, and I was like, okay, right. So the goal is to not publish until you think that maybe you could be good enough to be in a library at the end of the world.
Right.
So I wrote um, Decomposition Book is my fifth book. I wrote four books before that and set out to learn something with every book and try to make sure that by the time I was ready to publish, I could do something that could maybe be immortal. That was important to me.
Uh-huh. And what did you learn? Can I ask what you learned in those previous books and what you set out to learn so that you would be able to do exactly what you just said in this book?
Yeah. So the first book I wrote, I was 14, and I kind of wrote it by accident because I set out to write a short story, but um, when it got longer than 100 pages, I kind of realized that I was writing a book.
Yeah.
But at that point, my goal was just to get beginning to end. It was a horrible book, really, really quite bad. I don't want anybody to see it ever, but I
The
got to the
first learning
end.
experience are usually bad. Yeah,
You
so
know, you get to the end. So I got to the end of that one, and then next book, I wanted to work a little bit more on developing characters and developing like the beats of a plot a little bit better so that they landed more emotionally, I guess.
Mhm.
Because first book, it was just kind of like, this is what happened, you
Right.
know? But you want to kind of start to learn the art of this is what happened, the show don't tell, I guess. So I worked on that with the second book, and then I also started to work a little bit on dialogue. The third book, I was really paying attention to how people spoke to each other. I was really working on dialogue. I was really working on deciding what genre I wanted to land in, working on voice a little bit, like how I wanted my personal style to be. I think when you write your first couple of books, a lot of times you're mimicking authors that you've read
Yeah.
and liked, and you're
Yeah.
just trying to figure out how they did it. And then the by the time you get to your third, fourth book, then you're like, okay, how do I want to do it? Because you
Yeah.
don't want to just be like knock off whoever. You want to be you.
Yeah.
Um,
It's curious. I'm just reading.
so
I'm watching. I don't know if you read Watching Evil Dead by Josh Malaman. I'm just reading that now, and he's saying very much the similar kind of things. He's saying when you start, especially, even though you know you can't sing like someone who's got a very specific voice, try to emulate that, and then your voice will come from emulating that. And then after a few tries of trying it and kind of flexing that muscle, your own kind
yeah,
of voice will come from it, which is exactly the same. And you can tell
yeah,
in
you
this book
figure
that
it
you've
out.
really got your own voice because it really is a very specific, unique voice. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. No, that's because I got four books deep first.
Yeah, well, you can
You
tell.
really
Yeah.
you have to work on it. And then with this one, I think I just had a feeling. I was like, okay, it's done. Like I knew that my voice was cooked for some reason. It was just like the first four books I wrote, I didn't have that feeling. And
Hmm.
this one I did. And I was just like, all right, that's it. This is the one.
Time has come. Yeah. Uh-huh. So yeah, tell me a little bit. I mean, dialogues is must be it's something that's really difficult to get really right, especially when you're writing. We can say we're reading two kind of journals, if you will. One's a journal to whoever finds it, and one's a journal specifically to someone. So I'm quite
Yeah.
curious how you found those two voices and managed to kind of juxtapose them, make sure that they were different and had something to say at the same time.
Um, I, well, it was really important for me for the voices to be different, first of all, because my biggest issue with sometimes when you're reading like a dual POV is that you'll forget whose POV you're in.
Yeah,
And
100%. Yeah,
I'm like, I didn't want that to be happening to people. I
yeah,
wanted to be very clear whose POV they're in, especially like the age difference. You know, Savannah's very young, Ava's in her early 30s.
yeah.
Um, so I wanted to make sure that they were distinctive first, like base level. And then after that, I wanted to kind of examine like what we're gonna learn. You know, I think with Ava, she sort of goes into the woods lost mentally in
Right.
a similar way that Savannah does, and she kind of finds what she's looking for in the woods in some ways, you know? in life. Like there are some, obviously it's a pretty miserable time for her, but she also kind of finds um love. And like also I think that through writing her story she finds like her own voice, which is interesting because she's an opera singer,
Yeah.
and she goes into the woods an opera singer, and in the woods she's not opera singing, but she is finding her voice in a way through writing down what's happening to her. And Savannah is learning how to be an adult, and she's finding this journal, and Savannah's also learning how to be gay. She just
Yeah.
came out. She doesn't really know what she's doing. She's never dated a woman. She's just got this like homoerotic friendship with her ex best friend, and that's like her only experience, and that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So I think that with finding Ava's journal, she's kind of the perfect person to find it, um, because she gets to not only learn from like an elder lesbian, if you will, how being gay is, but she's also watching somebody find their voice and able to see an adult, like an actual, like who she considers to be a real adult, go through a struggle and develop empathy for her, and um, see how that she could develop empathy for her own situation. So it's sort of like they're both learning something, and they're both learning to find their own voices in a way throughout the
Uh-huh.
entire time. And it was important for me that those voices be different, but it was also important for me that they were both going through this sort of like journey to merge. And then at the end, they would be sort of in the same place in the same time, physically and mentally.
Mhm. You mentioned there also sexuality. That's another strong point that someone can learn sexuality, learn about themselves through reading about someone else who's gone through the same situation, which I thought was brilliantly, beautifully put as well.
Yeah, no, like when I was a kid, I didn't know that it was an option, I think, for me,
Hmm.
just because I wasn't really exposed as much, especially because the lesbians that I saw were like more like butch.
Right.
That was one of the only examples that I had because those were the examples that we had in popular culture when I was growing
Sure.
up. Uh, and I've got like all the dresses, and I wanted to be really feminine, so I was just kind of like, well, I guess I'm not gay.
Yeah.
uh and I think that Savannah probably would have maybe been like slightly less that, but gone through something similar. And then you get to see like different versions of gay in the book, and how you get to see somebody that's very comfortable in their sexuality and somebody that's coming into their sexuality.
Hmm.
And I don't know if I'm answering any of this question. I'm just rambling.
No, no, 100%, 100%. Yeah,
But
I was just
yeah,
curious
yeah,
that you
but
found it important to be able to learn about someone's own sexuality, their kind of concerns and uncertainty about what they want to be, who they are in life from someone they don't even know, and just kind of through what they've written through them and what they imagine they would tell them through what they've learned from them without even knowing them.
yeah, exactly. That's why, like, partially I think that, I wanted to build the journal so that Savannah was the perfect person to find it, which I think is what Ava would be happy with. I think
Mhm.
that Ava, at the end of the day, like, you think of what Savannah's doing and you're like, damn, that's kind of fucked up. Because she's holding this body hostage. She's holding the answers hostage. And she knows
Yeah.
that about herself. She knows that it's kind of fucked up, but she can't stop. But when I was thinking, like, okay, well, what would Ava's ghost actually think of this? Like, what would Ava actually think of this? And I think that Ava would be okay with it. I think that Ava, the person, would be like, at least I did something with this. Like, I helped this young girl get through a crisis, and I did find somebody to grieve for me and understand what I went through. And I think
Uh,
that she would be happy with that. And yeah, she also got to teach Savannah kind of different ways to be gay. Savannah is also a little bit of a self roast in that regard, because like when I first came out, I had all of these really stupid questions where I was like, okay, but if I go on a date, who's paying?
Yeah,
Um,
that's in the book. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
if I go on a date, who opens the door?
yeah.
I'm I don't know how like the gendered roles work in that. I don't know how to date a woman because I don't know the social conventions of dating a woman. And
Hmm.
I think that Savannah is in a lot of ways too concerned about that. And Ava's not concerned about that at all. She's comfortable with herself. She's just kind of like, I just need to figure out if this other person is gay.
Uh,
So,
yeah. So I mean,
yeah,
you mentioned
a
there
little bit
that
disappointing.
kind of
Hmm.
Savannah's a little bit kind of like maybe, but a little bit like you were when you were younger with these uncertainties and kind of lots of these questions. So I'm quite curious, where did uh, Ava's kind of quirks and the way she is, where did that come from? Was that how you would someone that you would have liked to have been around you when you were younger, when you were kind of finding out about yourself, or was it actually inspired by people that really did help you to kind of come out with yourself?
Oh, I definitely just stole a lot of Ava's quirks from my wife. 'Cause I think
Really?
that she's
Right.
adorable. Yeah, no, she is definitely. I wanted to write her as a love letter to my wife, and um, my wife is autistic. She's like a little
Mhm.
touch of the tism. And I think sometimes she worries that people don't like her, people don't find her lovable the way that she is because she has all these like little quirks. And I wanted to show Ava to highlight the little quirks that I see in my wife and like the things that I love about her. And it's been really, really satisfying for me because when I look at the Goodreads reviews, I read all of my Goodreads reviews obsessively. I am stalking that page. That's one of my OCD things about this book is that I'm like in there several times a day, seeing if there's anything new. And one of the things that has been very satisfying for me in my Goodreads is that everybody loves Ava and
Right.
everybody loves all of those little quirks. And so I've been able to go to my wife and be like, see?
Yeah. Uh-huh. I mean, that's probably I think, I mean, all of the characters have got their own quirks and kind of their own sense of humor, but specifically Ava is there's just these like little twists or turns of phrase that are really, really funny, even when they shouldn't be. And some of the worst moments are just, they work so fantastically well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Uh-huh.
gotta like there's like a little edge of that little edge of bitterness. I wanted to capture that. I think a lot of classical musicians have that little edge of bitterness, and people don't think she can't like it's her little kind of like phrases. Um, that doesn't come from being lost in the woods. That comes from being an opera singer. I
Right.
used to be a very serious classical clarinetist, and then obviously, you know, being married to an opera singer, you're around a lot of classical musicians all the time. And I think the general public thinks of classical music as like Lydia Tarr, you know, you think of this kind of like glamorous
Yeah.
jet set, like oh my god, the art, you know, whatever. But a lot of professional classical musicians have this like little edge of bitterness because there's just so many things that happen, like you're dealing with conductors, you're dealing with like um people falling asleep, whatever, you're dealing with like unions and bad wages and lack of protections and discrimination. And in Ava's case in particular, she's not a particularly feminine looking woman, she's also
Right.
plus size.
Uh-huh.
And in opera, she's a soprano. In opera, they want you to be skinny with in feminine and in like a knee length jewel tone dress, very femmed up, very beautiful and glamorous, and you know, so that they can see you as a romantic lead, you've got to be fuckable. Um, and Ava is two old opera people, not that. And so she would have had to pretend to be that in all of her auditions. She would have had to pretend to be something else. And there's like this inherent bitterness that
Yeah. No.
comes with years and years of that. And I think
Um,
that's where her voice comes from. Cause, like, yeah, she's lost in the woods, but she doesn't get her bitterness from being lost in the woods. She gets her bitterness from being a musician and being kind of
yeah.
used to this. And that's why she's able to accept it and be kind of funny about it. She's
And
used to it.
I'm guessing that's kind of why you sent her into the woods with those two other specific people. I won't go too into too much detail. Especially there's a
Oh,
male character there.
Hmm.
There's so much bitterness obviously there, but not just with him, but I can kind of the world and kind of the male gaze of these kind of people, I think, no?
Yeah, and it's like, with Chad, he's literally a Chad in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That's why I named him Chad. But it's also like he's so unaware of the struggles of these two women that they have to like he's unaware of the ladder. He's unaware of that glass ceiling. He's unaware of what each of them are dealing with completely. And his journey is kind of like by being lost in the woods, it's like the first time he's ever struggled. Um, and his character development, I think, is mostly about like him being like, I'm dealing with problems for the very first time, you guys. And these
Right.
two women are like, yeah, yeah, you are.
Now
So,
you know what it's like. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about I once spoke to a filmmaker who he wrote a film about a group of campers who went into like this cave, labyrinth of caves, and they got stuck there, and then they ended up having to decide who to eat and these kind of things.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but the reason I say that is because he actually sat in the cave in Formentera where was actually this cave that he could sit there and he could kind of think about the story. Um, and I noticed on Instagram you posted a picture of the film Black Swan, which you said you really is something that you really relate to, and you kind of
Hmm.
because you relate to the character, but also because you will literally do anything necessary for your art. So I'm quite curious what were kind of, I mean, you mentioned some things earlier about trying to be a mortician and these kind of things, but what kind of things did you surprise yourself that you found yourself willing to do apart from what you mentioned earlier to make sure
Mm.
this book was exactly how you wanted it to be?
Um, you know, Not camping, for sure. I'll do a lot of things, but not camping. Maybe if it hits a list. If it hits a list, I'll go camping.
Wow.
But I have never been camping. I've always been really, really fascinated by the survival aspect of things. I watched a lot of Naked and Afraid for this
Right.
book. So, a lot of Naked and Afraid, and I'm very judgy with my Naked and Afraid. The second somebody taps out, I'm like, huh, loser. You would have died in real life.
But that's very typical. It's very typical for things that we're afraid of ourselves. We're very judgmental about the same things
Mhm.
that we would probably do exactly the same thing now.
Yeah, it's like when somebody falls in the Olympics, like when you're watching Olympic figure skating on your couch with your Doritos and somebody falls and you're like, I wouldn't have fallen. I
Exactly.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
I guess what my ego says.
But apart from camping, you pretty much went the whole
Pretty
gamut.
much anything. I feel like Savannah is sort of my everything, my doing anything for this book, I guess,
Mhm.
because of the period of insanity that I went through, and then just decided to study. Because when I realized, like the second I realized I was clinically insane, I was like, "Fuck it, we're gonna lean in,
Lean
we're
into it.
gonna live for the plot, baby." So I did spend like a year just trying to be a beautiful mess. Um, and studying it and like seeing how it was, I did mix wine and Ambien quite a lot during
Really?
that year.
Okay.
So I'm very familiar with the feeling of waking up and being like,
What happened? Yeah.
I don't know anything that happened yesterday.
And
Um,
that's a fear that I've got. I don't drink or do any drugs or whatsoever because of a fear of not being in control, for example. Exactly the opposite. Yeah.
yeah, no, when I was studying how I was going to write Savannah, I really did spend a year with like complete disregard for my life. Which is funny because I mentioned that I'm so scared of death, but I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna write this kind of a person, I'm gonna lean in. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna be messy. And I was extremely messy for that year. My friends were very worried about me. But I learned. I learned how it was to be super messy and super crazy. And then I also learned how to pull myself out of that
Yeah.
and become a
That must have
regular
been a lot more
adult.
difficult to pull yourself out than to kind of to get as messy as you did, no? I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Um, I think the messiness was helpful though, because once I realized that it was really that bad, like that I was really that mentally ill, I was just kind of like, okay, if I'm crazy, I'm going to be crazy. And so I gave myself sort of permission
Mhm.
to let it be loose for a period of time. And I think that was freeing. And I think that's part of why Savannah during that time, though, I was very isolated. I did self isolate because I didn't want anybody to see
Yeah.
what I was doing. I didn't want anybody to see that I was letting the crazy loose. So I isolated myself from all my friends and family and anybody that could have seen, and just sort of did it secretly. And I think that's kind of what Savannah's doing. I think
Yeah.
that the reason that she's isolated herself is just because she just is like, she's realized the level of insanity that she's dealing with, and she just wants to let it be loose in an environment that it's safe. And you see a lot of Savannah's in this book. You see a lot of discourse about whether or not Savannah feels safe. And like when she feels least safe is when she's around the people that love her, like her mom,
Hmm.
um, and her therapist, like the real people in her life. And yeah, so I spent that little period of time exploring that, and then I was like, okay, now we pull ourselves out. The hardest thing about pulling yourself out of something like that is learning how to socialize with people
I was going to
again.
say with people again. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like learning how to have friends and to trust them.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's definitely something that I think Savannah is learning well as well, as to how to have friends and how to trust them, and trying to teach yourself out there how to trust another person, and starting, baby steps with this dead
Mhm.
person.
So would you say that you kind of the book, the last kind of the last third was also you giving yourself a kind of self therapy to kind of pull yourself back out of this messiness that you mentioned, and did you feel freed once you'd finished writing it yourself to be able to kind of be yourself while socializing with people, and because of having spent so much time on your own
Yeah.
being yourself and letting yourself be messy, were you able
Yeah.
to
No,
then kind of be messy and be yourself more freely, maybe not completely freely but more freely than previously?
no, I think that by the time I was writing this book, I was already years out of my messy period, uh,
Right.
and like looking back on it.
Right.
But it was important for me to be years out. I don't think that I could have written this book
Sure.
while I was still in this messy period, because I needed to fully understand. I needed to fully understand what it was to get in. I needed to fully understand what it was to get out. I needed to fully understand what Savannah would have been going through after the cut. You know, somebody messaged me and was like, what happens to her?" After somebody that has an arc messaged and was like, "What happens to Savannah though? 'Cause she's alive. She still has to reckon with this afterwards."
Mhm.
And it was important for me to have reckoned already by the time I
Yeah.
wrote the book. So I waited a few years and I studied that period of time, and I learned what it was to get completely out first and to get mentally well first. And then I was able to sort of do like a self roast of that period, but I don't think I could have written it while I was still messy. I think I needed to write it with complete control of the situation.
Mhm. But it's a big risk though, because it could, I mean, even if you have distanced yourself, it's still
Yeah.
throwing salt in the wounds, and those wounds might be more, still a lot rawer than you thought they were. So, I mean, thankfully that didn't happen, but that could have happened.
Oh no, it did happen.
I did
It did happen. It
on
happened several
occasion.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened several times, and I have a very good therapist and psychologist, and
Right.
I just kind of was like, right. I knew it would happen though, so I was prepared.
Mhm.
I was prepared with that. Like I was ready to go. It was a risk I was super willing to take, and I've done that with books before. I've used the books as sort of like a self-medication technique before.
Yeah.
So this wasn't my first rodeo, and I kind of knew how it was going to be psychologically. But no, that definitely did happen, and I think I was just prepared for it before even going into writing the
Yeah. Yeah.
book.
So Hill, the character Hills, who's like the therapist that Ava is Ava. Uh, Oh,
Savannah.
Savannah. Sorry, yeah, I'm getting mixed up the names.
Yeah.
Savannah. This relationship was that kind of a similar relationship to how you have with your therapist while you were isolating yourself and trying to kind of get your head around this story.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I actually do have a t-shirt that says Future Corpse, and my therapist said the other day I wore it to therapy, and my therapist said that the first time I ever saw her, I was wearing that shirt, and she just was like, "Oh boy, this one's gonna be fun." But she actually does look like Hilary Duff. I do call her Hills, uh, because of that. And she made a joke the other day. It was like, "Oh, you're the therapist in your book better be called Hills," and I was like, "She is." And when I told her the plot, she went like very pale and was like, "Please tell me that there was never a dead body." And I was like, "No, never a dead body. Lots of other things, but never a dead body." But she hasn't read it yet, so it'll be interesting to see her reaction to it
Uh-huh.
because I think it'll be like a fun little study for her as well to be actually
Yeah.
inside of what the brain is like when you're sitting with your therapist.
Uh-huh.
So
I mean, you mentioned that obviously there's quite a few things that mirror things that you've been through with your therapist, and you also mentioned that it's very much a love letter to your wife. Has your
mhm.
wife read it, and have you spoken about it, and have they given their opinion of you specifically dedicating one of the characters very heavily inspired by them?
Yeah, I talked about it with her before I did it. And my wife is like we talk about it at length. She loves to read. She's read it maybe more times than I have.
Really?
She loves it. She says that she thinks that is one of her best, like one of the best portrayals of like a musician that she's seen
Right.
because you get that bitterness, that like real bitterness that exists and that most people don't portray because they're not close to it.
Uh-huh.
So I talked to her about it at length actually, but she was well prepared because the thing about my wife is that she has always wanted to marry a writer. I have always wanted to marry an opera singer.
All right.
So
Really?
yeah,
Before
so
you
when
even
we met,
met? Right.
no, before we even
Yeah,
met,
yeah.
like literally before we even met, we both had exactly each other in mind. And then when we started dating, we auditioned each other. She sang for me. I gave her a full manuscript because it was like, okay, if we're going to have two arts careers in this house, we need to make sure that we respect each other as artists. And so we auditioned each other. We made sure that each of us was respectable in our own craft, and then we're able to be very supportive of each other's careers and make sure that we're honest about it from there. And so she reads everything as soon as it's written. She's like my first reader, my kind of like ideal reader, my target audience, I guess.
Yeah.
um and so she read everything. Like the way that I wrote this book was I had a Savannah document and I had an Ava document and then I had a document that was just called book. And I would write completely out of order, one like little chapter at a time, and then I would put it like a puzzle piece in the place where I thought it would go. I would just copy and paste it into the main document where I thought it would go. Um, and my wife read it out of order. She read it as it was going and was like, "Okay, where are you going to put this?" And we talked about
Yeah.
it all the time, every day. She's thrilled. She's very happy. She's living the dream.
Uh-huh. No, brilliant. Uh-huh. Um,
Mhm.
but what kind of feedback do you take from her then? Does she just read it and give her what she likes it? Maybe she doesn't like this. Does she give you any pointers or any pointers that she gives that you do use and kind of implement into the story? I imagine this kind of the satire that's related to the to how the musicians have got a bit of a chip on the shoulder, something that was very much from her, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she definitely like she's a very discerning reader. She's very picky. She reads a lot of books. She reads way faster than me. It's actually
Mm.
like embarrassing to be reading next to her because she can read a book every like 30 minutes.
Really?
And No,
I'm a real
it's
slow reader
insane.
as well. Yeah.
I was like, you should have been an editor. Like she can read a draft of a book in like an hour and a half, like full novel, and then give complete feedback on it. And it's been very useful for me. She's actually a
Sure.
pretty talented editor. So everything, like she'll go in, she'll be like, oh, like I don't think that this sentence or whatever like is really like saying what you want to say, or like I
Mhm.
think you need to elaborate a little bit more here on this specifically. And she's very good. She's got good
Yeah.
opinions, so she's been useful.
Uh-huh. Brilliant, brilliant. Uh-huh. Well, listen, before I
Mm.
let you go, I know that you're promoting this book, but I think you did a live yesterday on Instagram. I just jumped in just to see if you were saying anything specifically about this book, and I think that you said that you are planning something that is related in a roundabout way to what you're working in at the moment. Is that right? In hospitality, is that right? So you're kind of a bit
Yeah.
concerned. You're concerned that maybe you wouldn't be working in what you're working in hospitality for very much longer once
Mhm.
that one comes out.
No, I think that the thing about people that work in hospitality is that we all know what we think. Um,
Yeah.
my boss already knows what I think. she she's pretty aware. My boss is actually my friend. I love her. And you develop these like really close, tight. One of the things that I really want to explore with this book is I think something that my coworkers might appreciate is that when you are in hospitality, you develop because you're always getting yelled at by the outside. If you're working in service, any service industry, you're always getting like demands made of you or yelled at because somebody's not happy, and you get a lot of outside feedback all the time. Working in the front desk is very much like working in like a fishbowl, and
Yeah.
you've got people looking at you always. You're always on display. It's in a lot of ways an acting job. But with your coworkers, you're completely loose
Yeah.
in a way that I think that corporate people don't get, because corporate people, like, they're on display to their coworkers in a lot of ways, and with us it's like we're on display to the guests. So
Complete
with each
transparency
other
between
it's like,
yourself. Yeah.
fuck it. I've never seen
Yeah.
anybody party harder than people that work in hospitality and
Uh-huh.
retail, and when I was a barista. So I think that they probably understand already, but it's also kind of a love letter to working in those industries, because there's this way where it's hard to leave those jobs because you get so attached to the people that you're with.
Sure.
Um, so it's kind of like I want it to be a little bit beautiful in terms of what it is, and working in those spaces. But I also kind of want it to be like, I saw a meme the other day that was like, we should do the pit, but a night shift at a Waffle House. And that's that's the vibe I'm going for, is like
Right.
the pit, the night shift at a Waffle House, because you'd be surprised how many surprising things happen in my job, that you have to deal with. But I also
Yeah.
want to use this next book to reckon with capitalism as a whole, and what American capitalism in particular, because we have maybe even a little bit more than you guys, because we don't have universal health care. We don't have, like, our health care is tied to our jobs.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you see the situation here where people get sick, but the person that gets sick, this has happened with me too, because I'm chronically ill. I have Crohn's disease, and that's affected my
Right.
life a lot. But I'm also the person in my household in charge of the health insurance, because the health insurance is tied to my job.
Hmm.
So if I become too sick to work, that's a huge problem,
Yeah.
because then we got to figure out the health insurance from somewhere else. And the thing is, a lot of times with like it's not instant. You don't just get a job here with that offers health insurance and then the health insurance kicks in the same day you get a job. It's like you get the job and then you have
Work
to
your
work
way up
there for
there.
6 months. Yeah, you have to work there for like 6 months, and then your benefits kick in,
Yeah.
and then you can go to the doctor. But if you don't have it and you have something like cancer or Crohn's or something chronic, like that. Like for me, it costs like $23,000 each month, um, if I don't have it, to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
the level of care. And I want to use this book to, not in that way. Like, not about being like too sick to work necessarily, but I do want to use this book to explore what it means to be working to death
Yeah.
and what it means to have no choice, you know?
Yeah, to work wherever you
Because
have to work just to save your life, basically. Yeah.
yeah, what it means to have no choice and what it means to sometimes have to die at work. That's
Hmm.
sort of the big hint, I guess. That's sort of the big hint
Yeah.
for the next book is what it means to die at work. Because there are a lot of people in this country in that situation where they have cancer or something very serious like that, and you see them dying at work because they're responsible for the health insurance. You know, if they're like single or something, they're the only person in their household they can rely on for that health insurance. They're responsible for it. They have to go to work in order to
For
get the
sure.
health insurance, or else they're going to die anyway. Because
Hmm.
if you lose your job, and your health insurance is tied to your job, then you become homeless and you're too sick to work and you die. You're
Yeah.
too sick to go to the doctor and you can't and you're too sick to work and you can't afford to go to the doctor and
Hmm.
then you die. So I do want to use this next book as like an exploration of that specific phenomenon. Um, and not it's definitely going to be way weirder than that. It's going to be a really really unhinged book, but
Yeah.
what it's going to be about is what it means to die at work, what it means to have to work, even if you are dying.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Some more macabre stuff
Yeah.
coming our way sometime soon.
I love death. Everything's going to be about death.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. I could tell you, yeah. I never would have guessed it. But just
never
before I
would have
go,
guessed.
I
No,
know
it's
that
all going to be morbid.
but coming back to this book, I think you're going on a bit of a tour. I know you've got a launch with the fantastic Rachel Harrison, who's got a blurb on the front of your book. Where just before I
Yeah.
go, can
Yeah.
let people know where can they find you? Where can they get books signed
Yeah.
by you or along the tour, along the way?
So that one is going to be at Strand Books on May 21st at 7 p.m. in the Rare Book Room, which I'm very excited about. I did not think I was going to get the Rare Book Room at the Strand for the debut. It's a huge honor. I'm really, really excited. It's one of my favorite bookstores. So that stop for sure. I believe they're still scheduling out a bunch of things. So
Right.
stay tuned. I'll put everything up. I'll make sure that everything is very, very advertised and nobody will be able you'll be sick of me. You'll be very sick of me
Oh no, no, no,
coming
no.
up to the launch of this book,
I'll
but
keep a lookout so that I can
everybody will
add
be
all.
very informed.
No, no, I want to be
Yeah, so
informed so
people look
I can
at
add all the
everybody will be
links
very
underneath
informed.
and stuff. Yeah, sure. Uh-huh. Listen,
Yeah, and I definitely want to try to sign books in every bookstore in New York City for sure, at least. I'm going to
mhm,
be going around everywhere on just kind of my own sort of presidential campaign,
yeah.
signing books and doing things. So hopefully the signed books and all that be easy.
don't go with Chad and get lost somewhere in the department store or anything like that.
Oh, I would never. You wouldn't see me trusting Chad to take me into the woods.
Well, listen, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Wish you the best of luck with the release. I'm sure it's going to go down fantastically well, and I hope to speak to you again sometime
Absolutely.
soon. Probably about this next book you just mentioned. That'd be
Of
great.
course. Yeah. Thank you for your time. Thank you for having
No,
me.
thank
It's
you
been
so much for
fun.
your time. Thanks for speaking to me. I love the book to bits, and I'll
Yeah,
let
it's
you
my
know when
first
the.
interview. So,
But yeah, I saw that yesterday. You said you were nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about. It's a fantastic book, and
yeah.
I really appreciate you being such an open book as well in the interview. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah. I hope that I was competent enough at it. So, thank you.
100%. Yeah, of course you are. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hope to speak to you again sometime soon. Have a great
All
day.
right.
Thanks so much for your
Thank
time. All right. Take
you.
care then. Bye now.